Chris is a Christian through and through. He's not one of those forceful Bible bashers, but get him on the topic of religion, and he'll talk your ear off for hours on end. He believes that Judgment Day is coming soon in his lifetime, as most Christians do, and that anything that goes against the Christian faith is demonic and therefore evil. He is also a believer in a lot of conspiracy theories, from how the UN is a front for sending money to terrorists in the Middle East, to how global warming is caused by Russian submarines detonating bombs under the Arctic ice, to aliens and alien abduction. Alternatively, I'm an atheist, and don't go for any of that nonsense, no matter how many ancient alien documentaries or Bible passages he quotes as proof of his claims to the truth. Although I am a firm believer in ghosts because I've seen them ever since I was a child. Despite our differences in beliefs, we've been good friends for almost 20 years due to the fact that we respect each other's views and never let our discussions on religion and the paranormal get out of hand to the point of raining blows down on each other. The night that this happened played out just like any other night. He had dinner, spent some time playing music from his stack of vintage cassettes, and scolded one of his cats, Bingo, for knocking down some of the World War II model planes that he builds as a hobby. It was around 10:30 p.m., which according to Chris was late, and he decided to call it a night. He was awoken maybe an hour later to hearing scratching sounds at his bedroom door. Thinking it was one of his cats, he goes to open it, expecting one of his furry companions to come sauntering in. However, there was no one there. Thinking nothing much of it, he closed the door and went back to bed. Just as he was pulling the blanket back over himself, he heard the scratching again. Getting up again, the scratching stopped as soon as he opened the door. Being a little annoyed, he stepped out into the hallway and flicked on the light, wondering if it were his cats playing in the hallway, and that they ran off when they heard the door opening. But the hallway was empty. He checked the bathroom, thinking they may be hiding there, but found it empty. He looked in the kitchen and saw nothing there either. Chris, confused but too tired to give it any more thought, went back to bed but left the bedroom door open a crack so that he wouldn't have to get up again in order for his cats to just let themselves in. He was falling asleep again when he felt the mattress near his feet sag, as though someone was sitting on it. Figuring it was one of his cats, he said goodnight to his little furry sleeping companion. But before he could drift off to sleep, that's when he felt his hair being stroked, and heard a soft woman's voice whispering, pretty boy, pretty boy." My friend opened his eyes and saw the figure of an older woman, mid-70s to early 80s, leaning over him in bed, smiling down at him. Her hand was moving rhythmically in a slow stroking motion over his hair. He let out a slew of curse words, leapt from the bed, grabbed his pillow, and spent the rest of the night sleeping in the tub. Chris called me the next afternoon to confirm our plans over the weekend. At first, when he told me about the events of the previous night, there was nervousness in his voice that made it sound like he wasn't sure if it had really happened or if he had just had a bad dream and his brain hadn't fully processed that he was awake. Chris was just starting to describe what the woman looked like to me over the phone when I stopped him and suddenly asked, "Did she look like an older lady with short black hair, slightly hunched over?" He was genuinely surprised, exclaiming in an almost unbelievable voice, "Yes, how did you know that?" I replied, "I've seen her at your house numerous times now, but I've never said anything to you because I didn't want to scare you." There was a long silence on his end of the line, like he was trying to process what I had just revealed to him. Chris's voice finally came back, shaking, and he asked me, "Are you serious?" It was at this point that I could have made a joke or brushed it off, but I decided to be honest with him. I figured it would be easier for him to accept his first ghostly encounter instead of me lying to him. So, I told him, "Yes, I have seen her on occasions when I was over at your house. She wasn't a bad spirit, and I didn't get any ill vibes from her whenever I saw her or felt she meant harm." Not surprisingly, this didn't make Chris feel any better, and he kept bombarding me with questions. He asked what she was doing there, how long she had been around, and what she wanted. I told him that she probably just enjoyed being in the house she used to live in when she was alive and was watching over it. I also told him that I didn't feel like she was going to go all poltergeist in the house, and that she was just curious about her new roommate. But Chris, being opposed to all things supernatural and believing that anything like ghosts went against the Bible, didn't believe me. He said he would have a talk with his minister from his local church to see about getting his house blessed. I assured him it wasn't necessary, but I could see his point of view on such a thing. After all, not believing in ghosts all his life, only to be confronted with one, would be the same as me suddenly having the existence of God proven to me. So, Chris and his church minister held a short service at his house, and at the end, Chris was told that the old woman had found peace through their prayers and was able to move on. I visited Chris's house a week after the blessing, where, after some time of hanging out and him showing me his latest model airplane, he asked me, "Do you know if that old woman is still here?" I shook my head and said, "Nope, I can't see her anymore," even though she was standing in the doorway between the hallway and the living room. I figured there was no sense in making the poor guy worry over something he couldn't control. My apartment is haunted. I'm 20 years old and live in a fairly small apartment complex. I live here with my husband and 2-year-old daughter. We've lived here for about a year and a half, and the weird stuff started about 8 months ago. In my apartment, there are 2 bedrooms. In my daughter's room, there is a utility closet and a regular sliding door closet. In my room, one whole wall is basically a closet with 3 sliding doors. You may be wondering why I'm explaining closets. Well, this is because that's where all the creepiness started. One huge OCD tic of mine is closing doors. I cannot stand doors being open for no reason, so every door in my home is shut almost 24/7. Also, I thought of one day when I was visiting my cousin, who lives one apartment building over from me, for an all-day occasion. My daughter was gone with family for the weekend, and my husband was at work. Some odd stuff happened. My husband made it home first, and only left him for about 5 minutes to grab something out of the kitchen and bring it over to my cousin's place. He verified that I had indeed closed every door when he got home. After sitting around and chatting with my cousin for a few more hours, we went home. Walking through my front door, I felt like something was off. It was pitch black, but I chalked it up to my husband shutting off the stove light, which in itself is still odd. Stumbling for the light switch, we found one of my daughter's toys placed in front of the light switch. We were in the dark, and you could easily trip over it. This was a sign that something was off. I knew for a fact that it hadn't been there when I left earlier. I brushed it off and continued on, getting settled in for the night. Later, while walking down the hall, I stopped dead in my tracks 1/3 of the way down the hall when I saw my daughter's bedroom door slightly ajar. Had my husband been in there? I could have sworn he was in the living room the entire time. But then I heard it. The closet door, her closet door, in the pitch black of her room, had slammed open. I stood frozen for a moment before slowly peeking around the corner of her door frame. Nothing. The door was closed. But something else caught my attention out of the corner of my eye. I saw it. A small light. A flashlight that had previously been in the bottom drawer of the kitchen. It sat in the center of my daughter's bed, with the light illuminating the corner behind her bed. I approached it slowly, and the moment my hand connected with the light, a button-operated toy began flashing behind me. Yes, this toy that you have to manually press buttons on to turn on was flashing while I was cornered in my daughter's room. I felt my heart was just about to force its way up my throat. I couldn't breathe. Until, like a hero out of a movie, my husband walked in, asking what I was doing, and I left the room quickly. A few nights later, my daughter is still out with family, and my husband and I are in bed. It's the middle of the night, and I'm having the weirdest dream. I dream that I'm lying awake in bed, and there is a dark shape in the darkest corner of my room. It startles me awake. Also, I think I wake up in another dream with this tall, dark figure bent over my bed, staring down at me. This time, I'm jolted awake, and I'm trying to catch my breath while I sit in this silent dark. My husband is sleeping, and I'm essentially alone. That's when I hear it. My closet door is shaking back and forth on the track, not like being blown by the wind, but like someone is shoving it, trying to get out. At this point, I'm in tears and shaking. My husband awakes, and the moment his eyes open, it stops. I get frustrated and cry harder because now I feel like I'm going crazy. But this entity isn't done yet. Night after night of listening to toys coming on alone, and closets opening and closing, does it finally happen. Now, I have this problem with my eyes called optic neuritis, which causes me to occasionally lose my eyesight when I stress out too much. The reason I tell you this is because the night my husband finally got to see what I was talking about was the night I lost my vision for a few days. We were in bed sometime at night, and it was quiet. I'm really good at detecting sound since I'm basically blind. Every few months or so, I hear a familiar click. I sit straight up in bed. Our hallway light is a twist light, so to turn it on, you twist a little knob at the bottom, and it clicks when you twist it. At the same time, my husband jumps out of bed because he sees the whole light flash on through the crack of the door. I'm panicking, but I know that he is finally going to understand what I've been suffering through. He opens the door, and from what he told me, every door in the house was wide open. After a long night of closing doors and tear-filled apologies, we finally pass out from exhaustion. My daughter comes home and is acting strange, talking to walls, sitting in her closet, and pointing at corners. This scares me, but my husband says it's normal kid stuff. And before long, my daughter and I are in the living room, and she's using her potty chair. She points into the kitchen and says, "Push it off." Now, within seconds, a glass is flung from the counter at the wall and lands upright on the floor. I'm traumatized. So, I'm pretty sure I accidentally invited something into my house. I named it The Aller, after the short story by Guy de Maupassant, where a guy does the same. It started when I lost my keys. A bunch of us were at a friend's house in a small village outside of town. They were in a band together, and I was their default roadie, tag along. We performed at the local venue that evening. Since his house was closest, we stayed over there. We were probably about 18 to 19 years old at the time, and we were a rowdy bunch. So, when our friend's mum, whose house it was, asked us to steal a roll-up carpet that she liked the look of from the garage down the street, we were up for it. The great carpet robbery went off without a hitch, right up until we were jogging back up the hill to the house with this thing on our shoulders. That was when the button on my trousers broke, and my trousers fell. I tripped over them, and the contents of my pockets went flying into the night. I found my wallet and phone, but my keys were nowhere to be seen. I was fearful that an extended search might lead to us getting caught, so I had to give them up as lost forever on some country road in the middle of nowhere. 2 weeks later, I was reading in bed when I heard them fall. I had a half-attic conversion, which was a pretty big space. The rest of the floor was taken up by a spare room, with a little storage space left over in the ceiling above it. There was no furniture in the middle of my room for the keys to have fallen from, let alone a way for them to have been there since I lost them about 12 miles away in the aforementioned middle of nowhere. Yet there they were, right in the middle of my carpet, and I heard them land there. After this, strange things started to happen around the house. I'd hear things in the spare room next to me, like someone moving around, but there had been no one there when I'd check. I'd wake up to find my empty glasses beside the bed, despite being certain I hadn't drunk any of it. And my computer would randomly turn itself on in the night, waking me up with a sudden whirl of its fan. One morning, I was awoken by some baby birds tweeting loudly somewhere in my ceiling. I had noticed a bird coming and going outside my window, and it had obviously found a way into the space between my ceiling and the outside tiles of the roof. Just as I was contemplating how the hell I was going to deal with this, there was a loud, honest-to-God snarl and an equally loud bang on the roof. The tweeting stopped instantly, and I never heard it again. The snarl was like a dog or something, full-throated and furious. The bang was like someone slamming a fist onto a table. Another instance happened while I was at work on a Saturday morning. There was no one in the house save my girlfriend, who was having a lie-in. She was on her side, facing away from the bedroom door, when something sat on the other side of the bed. She felt the mattress go down with the weight of whatever it was, and she froze. She didn't dare move or open her eyes. After a minute or two, the weight lifted, and it was gone. When she eventually got the courage to look around, there was no one there. She was so freaked out that she rang me at work to tell me about it, and then left the house to spend the day in town until I got home. So yeah, I accidentally gave some entity keys to my place, and it took that as an invitation and moved into my spare room. It hasn't done anything hostile so far. In fact, an argument could be made that it's trying to be helpful, but the less, still freaky as hell. My family owns a country house in rural Missouri that I grew up visiting pretty often. There were plenty of beds and rooms to sleep in, but I always stayed in a room in the basement since it stayed nice and dark well into the day, and the bed in that one was by far the comfiest. Ever since I can remember, I always had a weird feeling when I went down there, but I was usually so tired from running around and doing farm work all day that I had no trouble falling asleep, so it never really bothered me. Stuff started to really pick up around the time I was 12 or 13. The one thing that really sticks out was one night when I was drifting off to sleep. I kept seeing a human-sized shadow walk past my room. This room was at the end of a hallway, and I saw it slowly walk back and forth past my room about 3 times, almost like it was someone on patrol or something. I always kept the door slightly ajar and the bright hallway light on because of the creepy vibes. Finally, I saw whoever it was stop in front of my door and wait there for 3 minutes before moving on. The part that really freaked me out and confused me was that the hallway boards are normally super creaky. Like even my little 12-year-old body would make these things pop and crack like crazy. So, I knew whoever was walking in the hallway at night couldn't have actually had any weight on them. The other thing that happened that really freaked me out actually caused me to stop sleeping in that room again. I was laying in bed, but this time I had just woken up and was laying with my feet hanging off the end of the bed. When, clear as day, I feel a single finger trace a line from the heel of my foot to the tip of my big toe. I even felt the damn fingernail at the tip of the finger. That same day, I went to my grandma and told her everything, and that I didn't want to stay in that room. Could she please make her bed up for me in an upstairs room? It was then that she told me the family secret. My great-grandpa built that house in the early 50s, but in order to do it, they dug up the grave of a Confederate soldier and moved his grave to a new spot 50 yards away. They had a priest bless the new spot and everything, but apparently that wasn't enough for the soldier. The adults in the family kept this from us kids so that we wouldn't get freaked out staying there. There was another time that I had been running around and came inside real quick to use the restroom. I ran through the living room and saw an old man wearing overalls, facing a giant bookshelf and looking at all of our family photos. As I ran through the living room towards the bathroom, he just slightly turned his head and smiled at me. My grandpa was also somewhere around the house, so I just assumed it was one of his friends or people working for him and thought nothing of it. I never saw him again after that, but a few years later, I was flipping through old family pictures and recognized one of the people. It was the same man I had seen that day, wearing the exact same outfit, jean overalls and a plain white t-shirt, with the same sweet smile on his face. I asked my grandma who that was. Turns out, it was my great-grandpa, the man who had built the house and who died 20 years before I was born. Even though I never saw him after that, I would always come back to the living room to see his favorite old rocking chair rocking back and forth. It never freaked me out because I knew who it was, and that he was probably just saying hi and enjoying his old favorite spot in the afterlife. Also, by the time I had told my grandma about all the weird experiences I'd had, and she explained that several of the women in my family have a knack for seeing ghosts and stuff, it made me feel better. Because I literally see something or have very freaky dreams every time I visit. Things I've also heard and seen include a random little girl watching me while I was sleeping, a young Native American man watching me and saying something I couldn't understand, random objects moving to different places when no one was there, a baby crying when there was no baby around, and just general nuisances from that Confederate soldier in the basement. I think he enjoyed trying to scare me, so I really didn't like him. Hey there, this is Joe. Hope you enjoyed these true creepy stories. They say majority of the viewers aren't subscribed. Help me continue to build this incredible community by subscribing. I'd love to have you be a part of it, especially if you love scary stories. See you next time.